For like Larry, she always does that. She opens a little can before and has her drink. I myself today have a San Pellegrino, Melograno and Arancia, which is basically, I'm pretty sure, orange and pomegranate. And I love pomegranate and I love San Pellegrino, so this is gonna be tasty. Ooh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Hello and welcome to yet another video, and as I'm sure you can tell from the thumbnail and from what time of month it is a recap, it is a wrap up. So today I'm obviously going to be talking to you guys about the books that I read in December, what I thought of them, whether I recommend them. So this month I read 10 books. Wait a second, let me check that. Let me whip out my Fable. I read 10 books in the month of January, which I am so happy about. Honestly, the year could not have started out better. Like, it was generally the best well, obviously the best reading month all year, but it was the best way to start off a reading year. So out of that, obviously you guys know I picked a TBR of 6 books at the beginning of January. I did not complete that TBR. Big surprise, honestly. I mean, out of the 3 TBRs I've set, I've completed 1 of them, so not a great track record. But yes, I only read 4 out of the 6 books once again, and I didn't even realize this, but the same thing happened in November. The Bridge Kingdom did not get read. That book, I swear to God, it has just bad luck. I did not have time to read it within the month. That was so disappointing because I was so looking forward to it. So it's literally still here. Out of the books I read, 6 of them were physical books and then 4 of them were Kindle books. This past month I've been really getting into my Kindle. I did get a new one and it has the literal cutest case. It's an F1 case. I love it so much. So I think just having a new Kindle actually works. My old one really lagged a lot. I think that's really motivated me to read more books on my Kindle, so I'm very happy that I have been doing that because I did buy it for a reason. So yeah, grab yourself a nice cold or warm drink, be that from a can, from a glass, however you want it, and let's get right on into the video. So good. So the first book that we read this month was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Now I read this book because obviously I wanted to see the movie, and I did watch the movie and I did enjoy the movie. I thought they changed a lot of stuff in the book, but in a way that I was kind of okay with. I sort of enjoyed it more if I hadn't read the book, but Tom Blythe, I mean, come on. Literally, I'd maybe be like, oh, you changed this, and I see Tom Blythe's face and I'm like, you're forgiven because Tom Blythe was in it. I love that man. Anywho, we're not here to talk about the movie, we're here to talk about the book. So I enjoyed this book. Honestly, I really did. Like all the other Emily Henry books that I've read, it was a good book. Like, it's nothing wow, it's just a fun, easy romance. And reading a book about summer holidays where they're literally like boiling hot when I was in winter and it was freezing was really funny to me, especially because when I was reading this, it was when it was snowing in Paris, so it was like completely at odds with like when I was looking out my window and then when I was reading it here. I gave this book 4 stars, which I think is the same that I gave to both Funny Story and Great Big Beautiful Life, which are the 2 other Emily Henry books I read. So at least she's fairly consistent, and I don't know, I really liked it. I don't have much to say. I did absolutely love the ending of it, especially. I'm a sucker for a happy ending, and so I read this ending and it made me so sad. Like, I got teary. I almost got teary. I don't think I got teary. I can't remember. It was a month ago, guys. But yeah, so I really enjoyed this book. I'm so glad that I read it. I'm really happy that I saw the movie. The movie was just such a fun rom-com. Like, I feel like we don't get enough fun rom-com movies. But again, I'm deviating. Talking about books, not movies. I would 100% recommend this. Whether you've read Emily Henry, whether you haven't, I just think it was a really good romance, and I absolutely loved our 2 main characters. It was funny though, because Tom Blythe was not at all how I pictured Alex, but now, like, having seen the movie, that is only how I can picture Alex. But I do think Emily Bader for Poppy, that was great casting. I really liked the dual timeline of this book. I liked how we both got like the current summer and then the past summer, so we got all their history as well as getting their current story. I found that really interesting. I do love me a book with a dual timeline. I like when it's like show not tell. Wait, or is it tell not show? I don't know, but like when they don't just say have a flashback to this happened in the past, they actually show us what's happened in the past and you get to see their thought process and everything else going on. I really enjoyed that in a book. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this if you're looking for a fun summer read, fun beach read, if you're a fan of Emily Henry, if you've never read Emily Henry. And so honestly, this book was just a really good book to start off the year because it was light, it was breezy, it was entertaining, and it made me feel like I was on holiday even though I was here revising for my exams. So like, what more can you want from a book? The next book that we read was The Favourites, and I do have this in physical, but my sister's reading it at the moment and she took it with her, so I cannot hold it up to show you, which is annoying to me because I don't know what to do with my hands otherwise. Oh my god, I love this book. I love it so much. It was my favourite book I read all month. Honestly, obviously I don't know it will be book of the year, but it will definitely be up there. It was just that good. But I knew I would enjoy it because it just seemed so fascinating to me, and reading it I was blown away. It was a 5-star read for me. First 5-star of the year, and it was actually the second book that I read in the year, so we're off to a great start. As you know, if you've seen my 24-hour reading challenge, at the beginning I was kind of unprepared for how toxic they were, but honestly I thought the book dealt so beautifully with the fact that when they start off the book they are teenagers. They're like, I think 15, 16 years old, and then at the end they're in their 30s, and you do see throughout the book that actual character growth and them maturing, getting nicer as well, a bit less messy, a bit less toxic, and I just thought it was perfect. Again, the end was absolutely beautiful. I was so happy with how it ended because I was really worried going in about how it would end, but it ended so nicely, and honestly that book was perfect to me. Also, I found out that apparently the author kind of was inspired by Wuthering Heights, so it's kind of not like based off Wuthering Heights, but it's kind of inspired by Wuthering Heights, if that makes sense. And considering the movie is coming out in a couple weeks, I think, I couldn't have read it at a better time. And so now I do want to read the book, Wuthering Heights. I definitely also will be going to see the movie. But anywho, enough about that. We're not talking about Wuthering Heights, we're talking about the favourites. But honestly, it was a 5-star book for me. Our two main characters, Kat and Heath, I love them so much. They are my babies. The love they have for each other, even though it's like really toxic at the beginning, again, you see that love mature from kind of like, how do I say, basically at the beginning they are like each other's whole world. They don't really have any other family, and so it's a very possessive, very toxic, very like codependent relationship. But then obviously as they get older, well, they spend time apart, they meet other people, they get friends, and they just expand their circle, if you will. And I think that is something that was really important for their relationship, because then at the end you see that they are so much better for having spent that time apart and gotten time to like understand each other without the other, if that makes sense. Like understand themselves outside of Kat and Heath. And I thought it was perfectly done. I thought that this book was absolutely amazing. Kat is the main character. I loved her so much. She was just so determined and she went after what she wanted. And Heathcliff was down bad for Kat, and I love that in a man. I honestly would not change a thing about that book. I loved it oh so much. I could definitely see myself rereading it at some point. It was so entertaining, and I loved as well how the story was told. So you had like Kat's perspective, what thing was happening, and then at the beginning of each like section you'd have an extract from a documentary that was being made about them. And I thought that was really interesting because you had like the documentary explain kind of what happened, or the people on the documentary talk about it, and then you had Kat's actual perspective on what happened. And I found that so fascinating because it did kind of give you like a spoiler or a teaser of what you were going into, and I just, it was perfect. I have literally no notes on that book. 5 out of 5. Love it oh so much. Okay, so the next book I read, and this was another one from my TBR, and that is Jesus Christ. So the next book I read was one that was also from the TBR, and that was Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steven. This book, honestly, it was mid. I will say it was mid. I think I gave it a 3 stars. Let me check. I gave this book 3 stars. This was, I'm pretty sure, a debut novel, so I'm not gonna judge like an author if it's a debut novel, because I understand that like the author gets better as they write more, so their debut novel is not necessarily representative of their full potential. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars, and honestly it was mid. It kind of felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be, and again, that could be a result of this being their first book, but it felt a bit odd because it was technically romantasy, but I'd say it's really more romance, but then the side plot is fantasy, but it's really just a romance set in a fantasy setting, if you will. But it also felt like the writing felt very YA, and yet there was swear words and sexual references, and that didn't quite fit for me, and I just felt like the book wasn't fully sure about what it wanted to be. It was a really interesting story, and I felt like it had such potential. I just felt like the author just didn't go far enough with that potential, because especially the ending, I felt it was very Disney. You know, like the power of love and all that, but that's not really what I want to see for my fantasy, especially if it's a book that I don't think it is necessarily for like younger readers. I think it's for people like 18-year-olds. And no, it wasn't an objectively bad book, it just wasn't great. I will say there were some quotes in here that are absolutely gorgeous. There were some lines that if I was a person who like annotated things for that reason, I definitely would have annotated them. There are a lot of lines that were very beautifully written, I will give it that. So on that side, very poetic in the writing, but nonetheless it didn't take away from the fact that I felt that the story was just just kind of lacking. And I also, because the book, this is a big hardback and it is like what, 300, like 400 pages. I feel like that's way too long for what happened in it. There was also some plot lines that to me just didn't make sense. Like, you had this guy and you thought he was going to be an important character, and then he just wasn't, and at the end of the book we'd completely forgotten about him. We didn't mention what happened to him, and I found that very strange. So yeah, all in all, this wasn't a bad book, like objectively, but personally it wasn't for me. Okay, so the next book that I read was one that I had not even slightly planned on reading this month. It's not even a book that was on my physical TBR, and that's because I bought it this month, and that is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy. So I went shopping, I got this book, and I didn't have any books with me, so I just picked up and started reading it, and oh my god, I was hooked. I loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, but really there's no reason I didn't give it 5 stars because I have no notes. This was a really, really good book. It was beautifully written, was emotional, it was like perfect. I just, maybe, who knows, maybe I'll look back in a couple months and I'll change this rating to 5 star. I have said that is something I do sometimes. I go back and I change my ratings, so who knows, but at the moment I only gave it 4.5 stars. I love this book. Basically you follow like Jennette McCurdy. She talks about being a child star and her relationship with her mother, and then her like eating disorder. She was also alcoholic, I think, for a moment, and so you just like her life and the problems that came with being a child star and how it's not all it's made out to be. I love this book. It is a well-known book for a reason because it's just really, really good. I also thought it was really intelligent how at the beginning when she's a child you can really feel it in the writing style, and then when she's older, the words she uses, the way she phrases things, you can actually see that there's an intentionality behind that. So she writes more, not naive, but a lot more simplistically when she's younger, and then as she gets older the writing style evolves because she herself is growing up. And I thought that was so intelligent, especially because Jennette McCurdy isn't necessarily a writer, she was an actress, and so now she is doing writing. I think she just came out with a new book which I also really want to read. It sounds really interesting, but I just thought it was really, really well written. Also the story, there were literally moments where I was like, what the hell? It's actually like some of her life events are ridiculous, like they're crazy. The relation with her mother was really interesting as well, I thought, especially as someone who studies psychology. I found this book really, really interesting because it really does show like the impact your childhood, your relationship to your parents' mental health as well, the impact that that will have on you, on your mental health, on your life, and like the problems that that can cause. And I thought it was a really good book. I loved it so much. It does read like non-fiction because obviously that's what it is, but I think it's entertaining enough that even if you don't read non-fiction, you should definitely pick this up and give it a try, and I don't think that you'll be disappointed or bored or let down. I just thought it was perfectly done, and I honestly have no notes on this book. And saying all this, I'm generally wondering why I did not make it a 5-star book, so I think we're probably going to change that. We pull out Fable. 5 stars. Woohoo! The next book that I read is the same as I'm Glad My Mum Died, in that I didn't intend to read it at the beginning of the month, but I bought it this month, and that is Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I have been eyeing this book for a while now. Evelyn Hugo is one of my favourite books of all time, and so I wanted to read more Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, and let me tell you, Evelyn Hugo was not a fluke. Taylor Jenkins Reid is just that good an author. This was also a 5-star read. I absolutely loved it. I read it in like 2 days. I could not put it down. I love a niche, and so this was kind of like a tennis niche. This was like a tennis niche, and I found that so satisfying because I also used to play tennis, not even slightly at like any kind of good level. I did like 1 year of tennis classes, but it's a sport that I'm interested in, and so reading a book about it was just amazing. I love this book so much. I really like the character growth, especially because this book isn't set necessarily over a long time. You have a kind of quick run through of her story, but most of it is set during her training to get a Grand Slam, so just kind of over 1 year, but just the character growth during that year is absolutely crazy. This book was also had some really sad moments. I almost cried at a part. If you've read it, you'll know. I love the romantic relationship our main character had because it really felt like an adult romantic relationship, because obviously a lot of books I read, they're either about younger characters or they're meant for younger authors, and so that means sometimes obviously they'll be immature or just they'll do things that are a bit stupid, which makes sense because they are either younger themselves or for younger readers, so that's what they'll relate to more. But that doesn't change the fact that sometimes it's so refreshing to read like a mature relationship where both people in it act like adults. One of my favorite things about this book is that it took the successful women against other successful women trope and it flipped on its head, and that was amazing. And I bowed down to Taylor Jenkins Reid because have no notes. Again, this honestly January has been such a good reading month. It wasn't necessarily similar to the favourite because it was about athletes and both of them followed them over their career, and then as they had a comeback when they were slightly past their like peak, so like slightly older than most athletes are, so they were similar in that aspect and both were just amazing. So yeah, honestly I cannot wait to pick up yet another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I don't know which one it will be. I'm thinking Atmosphere. I've seen great things about that. Okay, the next book we read was on my TBR and you guys guessed it. It was another 5-star read, and that was The Serpent and the Wings of Night. So I've been aware of this book for a while, but because it was about vampires, and vampires just isn't a genre that I reach for anymore. Like it was when I was younger, I had a huge vampire phase, but just since it's just not one of my points of interest, I kind of just don't care. But then I found out there was Enemies to Lovers to Enemies, and I immediately picked it up, I immediately bought it, and then I fast tracked it and read it as soon as possible. And honestly, even if you're not a vampire reader, because I really am not, it's not my thing, this book was oh so good that it hasn't necessarily changed my mind, but like I'll stop judging books by its microtropes like vampires, werewolves, dragons, whatever. If people say it's good, then I'm gonna read it regardless. And oh my god, this book was so good. I realised before I read this that I hadn't read a proper fantasy series or duology, because this is a duology with then one novella. I hadn't read a proper one since I read Throne of Glass, which was in last May, which is crazy to me because that's like the genre that got me into reading, is like proper full-on fantasy books, and I hadn't read one of those since May. This was absolutely perfect. It also came at a perfect time when I was craving that, and it scratched that itch. Perfect. Again, no words. I have read so many perfect books this month. I will say though, before I get into like my thoughts on it, Enemies to Lovers to Enemies, I don't fully agree with that. On paper, they were on opposing sides of something, and then they were lovers, and then they were back to opposing sides of something, but I wouldn't say it was like fully an enemies to lovers to enemies. I'd say it was more they were in a trial against each other, then they were lovers because they were allies then lovers, and then they realized that they were actually on opposite sides of a war. It was maybe reluctant allies to lovers to enemies, but even so, it wasn't, they liked each other, you know, they were nice to each other. It wasn't like full-on enemy. It was more just like we're supposed to kill each other, but I don't know, it just didn't hit for me in that part of it. But the rest of the book was so good that I didn't even care. I love this book. These characters are my baby. I loved their relationship. It was so healthy. It kind of reminded me of Violet and Xaden, just in that they wanted the best for each other. You know, like the amount of times where Rain, like when you had his point of view where he was just thinking, I don't want to hold her back, I want her to reach her full potential, I want to do everything possible, I hate that she was held back. Like, ugh. That is what I want to hear in fantasy books. I want to hear the male love interest doing his best for the female love interest to become the best version of herself. You know, I want a male love interest that is down bad, that will never hold the female character back, that will support them in everything they do. And this book delivered. Oh my god, this book delivered. Rain is honestly, dare I say this, one of my favourite book boyfriends, if not my favourite book boyfriend. He may have surpassed Xaden. I love him so much. And then Araya as well. She was also, I felt, a female main character that was allowed to be angry. And I really like that, because a lot of female main characters, and I do feel that's changing slightly with more recent books that are coming out, but they just aren't angry because that's just not a female trait. That's not a trait that I've seen in many female main characters, even in fantasy books. And so I love that Araya got to be angry, and she was a killer and she was really good at it. I just found this to be so refreshing, with a healthy relationship, a kind of, not a new female main character, but a female character that was allowed to have flaws and who was allowed to be strong and powerful, and a male main character who didn't try and hold her back or make her less than. I don't know, this book was amazing. I then read, probably should have talked about these all at once. I then read the 6 Scorched Roses novella. I read that on my Kindle, little Kindle shout out, and I love that as well. I thought it was so good. I haven't really read a lot of novellas, so I was worried that maybe I'd find it a bit rushed or like not much happened, and I honestly didn't. I felt like the perfect amount happened for how fast the story was moving. I did like how it was a bit more slowed down than the main duology, because it really did feel like the main duology are like action, they're fantasy, but this one is more like a science-based romance, if you will, and I really enjoyed it. I loved our 2 main characters, Lilith and Vale. I loved their romance. I thought it was just really beautiful. So it was a novella. I gave it 4.5 stars. I don't really have a lot to say because, like I said, the story was quite short, but I just really enjoyed it. And then after that, I read the second book in the, what's it called? the Nightborn duet. So this is the first book, and I read the second book, which is called The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. I also loved it. I didn't find it as good as the first one, but it was still a 4.75 stars, so honestly it was a 5-star series for me. And I do think it was maybe also just not as good because that first one filled the void of like fantasy books that I had, and then the second one would already had that void filled by the first one, if that makes sense. But no, I really liked it. I thought the ending was beautiful. I just felt like it perfectly developed their relationship and just really solidified the love they had for each other, and obviously that wasn't what the story was necessarily about. I also found it really interesting, the politics of it. I liked that the first one was the trials and we didn't have a huge focus on the politics, and then the second one was a lot more, you had politics and then at the end you had a war, you had rival clans and all that, and I thought that the two worked really well together, that you had slightly different like subcategories to each of them, but both did them so well. So all in all, this whole series, so the first book, the novella, and then the second book, it's a 5-star series. It's probably gonna become a god tier series. I cannot wait to continue the other books in the, I think it's the Crowns of Nyaxia like series is what it's called, and I cannot wait to read the other books in that series and like see the other characters, because also when I was reading the second book, whenever Vale and Lilith popped up, I was kind of like, ah, my babies. These books were just amazing, and they were the fantasy series that I so desperately needed, and they did not disappoint. The next book that we read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. We picked this up because this was just a book that I had on my Kindle, and I just needed to read a Kindle book because I was on holiday, so I couldn't bring a physical book with me, and honestly I really enjoyed it. I'm pretty with Emily Henry's first book, and I feel like I could tell the writing style definitely was a lot better in People We Meet on Vacation, for example. I gave this book 3.75 stars. It wasn't quite a 4-star. I felt like there were some plot points that weren't necessary. Either they weren't necessary or they weren't developed enough to feel necessary, but I really liked it. I liked our two main characters. I liked the relationship they had. I thought it was really interesting, them kind of challenging each other and them writing books in each other's genres. I really liked that. I do feel like there was a slight disconnect in the book because you had the romance going on, but then you also would have them interviewing people who'd been in a cult, and I did feel like it was kind of, it did make sense in the book, but at the same time it kind of didn't. I did find that aspect of it a bit weird. It's a romance book, but then you've also got people who are in a suicide cult. It didn't quite match for me. I still really enjoyed the book and I did like the romance. They're probably not my favourite Emily Henry couple. I thought Gus was a bit too, you really had to force him to communicate a bit too much, but I did enjoy it and it was a good book. Like I said, 3.75 stars, that's nothing to complain about. I do think just because it was the first Emily Henry book that she wrote, I think she definitely got a lot better at writing characters, and then just the writing style in itself got a lot better as the years went on. But no, so I did enjoy it. It was a good book. I'm really working my way through the Emily Henry discography. I read 2 of her books this month, but yeah, it's definitely not my favourite of hers, and I think her writing style really greatly improved with time. Okay, and then the last book that we read this month was another one from the TBR, and that was Collided by Lauren Asher. So honestly, I give this book a 3 stars. I didn't really like it. I'm low-key thinking this is probably actually 2.5. I was disappointed honestly because I really liked the first one. Like, it took me a while to get into. Once I got past like the first half of the first one, I really enjoyed it, and so I hope the second one will be better. I did not. I feel like it was, and I genuinely wonder, I think there is a chance that on my Kindle I may be reading the indie published version, and then the book, obviously the first one was the trad published version, and I think that might explain why maybe it didn't feel as good in the writing style, in the dialogue, in some of the scenes, and I think maybe it's because it's the indie version. So if I had read like the trad published version, I might have enjoyed it more, but I don't know because I don't have the trad published version, so we'll never know. But as it is, I'm not the biggest fan of the second one. I do think I will still continue this series because I enjoyed the first one, and I'm really interested to see Jax's story because I feel like Jax is a character that we have not gotten enough on, and he's really interesting to me. So I will read the next one. I just am disappointed by the second one because I just didn't like it that much. I didn't hate Liam, but I thought he was a bit immature for his age. To be fair, I was the same with Noah, but at least Noah, I don't know. I don't really know how I feel this book. I just know that I didn't really love it, and I feel like there's only a certain amount of times that you can mention or think of your penis in a book before I get the ick, and that book way past that limit, But there you go, those were the 10 books that I read in the month of January. It was honestly a top tier reading month, even if I did have like 1 or 2 books that I wasn't a fan of. Overall, I had 4 5-star reads out of 10 books, which is crazy, and I feel like I started off the year on such a high. There's no way that any other month will beat the first month, but we'll see, let's hope. But yeah, so these were the books that I have in physical, and then obviously a bunch of them were on my Kindle. I really enjoyed this. I'm really happy as well that I read so many books. I'm really feeling like I'm getting back into my reader era. I'm finally free from the holds of the slump, and I could not be happy about it because, as you can see, I have a lot of books on my TBR and I cannot wait to get to them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Literally every time I get a new subscriber, I get so happy because I'm just loving that this channel is growing and that more and more people are actually interested in what I have to say about my little books that I read. I just want to say it's greatly appreciated. But anywho, I must bid you adieu. We are at the end of this video, so I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you next Friday for a new video. Bye!